Before we get started, I did want to thank all the directors for being with us. Just your presence alone is important, and I appreciate your support. So thank you. And you are all here, so it would take too long for me to thank everybody by name, which says something. So thank you again.
President Levesque, can I ask a question?
Sure, Council Star.
I don't know Stephanie or Sophie Mandel.
Sophie's going to get introduced to us in just a few moments.
Oh, good. I'll wait for the surprise. Okay.
Vice President Schnepp has been rehearsing her introduction. Make it magnificent.
It's been 2 minutes if you'd like to get started.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Well, I want to welcome everybody to our Town Council special meeting for our strategic planning. The date is October 13th, 2022, and the time I have on my clock is 7:08. So again, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for being here with us. This is very important exercise in strategic planning for here in the town of Barnstable. And with that, I believe we have quorum. If Town Council Administrative Assistant Cynthia Lovell, if you could do the roll call, please.
Councilors Starr,
Here.
Steinhilber, Lutke. Here. Atzelis.
Here.
Cusick.
Here.
Neary. Rapp Corsetti.
Present.
Mendes.
Here.
Shaughnessy.
Here.
Levesque.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Schnepp.
Here.
Cullum.
Yes, here.
You have quorum.
Thank you. And like all of our meetings, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And if everybody can mute their microphones other than Councilor Mendes, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Mendes. Appreciate that. And at this time, I want to hand the floor over to, actually, I need to make an announcement. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make your presence known. Okay, not seeing any. Obviously, this is being televised on Channel 18 live, so thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in Channel 18 or from the website. And also would like to make an announcement that we are participating remotely. Everybody's participating remotely due to the extension in the COVID protocols and allowing us by the legislature, state of Massachusetts, to have meetings, public meetings via remote resources. So with that, I'd like to hand over the meeting to Vice President Schnepp, and he's going to do an explanation exactly what our exercise might be today, and then also introducing our facilitator, Sophie Mandel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome everyone. I'm very pleased that everybody could make it tonight, and thank you again to the staff that is present. Normally, the Town Council engages in a strategic planning process every 2 years, and it generally has been held in either September or October of the year. This year, we had a little greater ambition in our strategic plan. As we had discussed in earlier meetings, we wanted to start our process with a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, and then move into a review of our current plan and and ways to amend it. Because of some scheduling issues with our consultants, and also and primarily our discussions with the town manager, that to really be effective, our strategic plan should coincide more readily with our fiscal planning. As you know, our staff is already engaged in the fiscal planning, our operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2024 as we speak. And yet we're, this would be now when we're starting to do our strategic plan. And by the time we finish it, they're well on their way to those budget assumptions and the presentation of what we review in the spring. So we thought it would be better to actually move that process into the late winter, early spring. And that's what, President Levesque and I are proposing. Obviously, leadership of next year, whether it continues or changes, may have a different view on this, but we would like to kind of tee it up for that to happen. So as a result, what we wanted to do for this meeting, because we had it scheduled and it felt like it would be a good opportunity to really look at what we have created in our strategic plan and how it is used by our staff. A lot of times we do the plan and then we don't do that much as a council with it for 2 years. And we do get references to the plan during the budget process, but we don't really get as much of an in-depth look. So we talked to Town Manager Ells and asked if we could use this meeting tonight to have a deeper dive into what our strategic plan is and how it has influenced and been integrated into the planning and budgeting of our towns, the town. So without further ado, we have asked to have facilitation of this meeting so that all 13 counselors can participate. As you know, when President Levesque is in his normal position, he is not really able to fully participate in a meeting. And so it's always nice to have somebody outside and external be able to facilitate the meetings. So we're very fortunate that Sophie Carilla Mondell from CBI was available to help us both plan and facilitate this meeting and also provide us some notes and documentation so that we'll have good feedback. And she's actually on the West Coast. And I would like to just turn the meeting over to her and she can let us know whatever instructions we need to proceed through the meeting. So Sophie?
Great. Thank you, Councillor Schnepp, and thank you, President Levesque.
Thank you.
My name's Sophie Carrillo-Mandel. I'm an associate facilitator with the Consensus Building Institute. CBI is based in Cambridge, Mass. And as Councillor Schnepp said, I am in Sacramento, California, which is why you can see sunlight behind me. So I'll be your facilitator for today. So before we start, I just want to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of our purpose for being here. I'm going to pull up our agenda. So as Councillor Schnepp said, even though the title of this agenda is strategic planning, this is really pre-planning. So our purpose for today is to ground the town councilors in a thorough understanding of the Barnstable strategic plan, its purpose, how it's currently used, and how it may be used in the future, to preliminarily prepare the councilors for a broader assessment and revision of the plan intended for 2023, and to capture any high-level feedback about essential areas of improvement for the plan to be documented and integrated into the 2023 planning. So after I give this introduction, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Mark Ells, your town manager, and his staff. He'll review the different priority areas, or excuse me, he'll give an overview of the strategic plan, after which we'll have an opportunity for clarifying questions. Then we'll get into an overview of the different priority areas. There are 9 priority areas, and after he gives a quick overview of each one, we'll have an opportunity for questions and comments. And again, we're not seeking a lot of, if you have really pressing comments about the content, we can track that and share and save that and document it for your strategic planning efforts early next year. But at this time is really an opportunity for you all to understand the strategic plan. We'll take a break in the middle of those 9 topic areas. So you can get a drink of water, rest a little bit, and then come back. And at the very end, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about issues that should be addressed before going to the next stage of strategic planning. So with that, are there any questions about the agenda? And Counselor Schnapp or President Levesque, did you have anything to add?
Just that, like you said, this is a broad discussion on vision, on strategic planning. It's not necessarily a deep dive into operations. So that what I would probably recommend moving forward is that, anything that would be discussed as far as a strategic plan now or later, and that, instruction would be given to the administration, town manager Els, his staff, and then having a follow-up workshop type of thing of how that would be implemented, changes in the strategic plan or current ways in the strategic plan, and then moving in that direction. So just to try to, not get into a rabbit hole or different things like that during the meeting. So just to add to that, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just quickly, sort of on that note, let me share some high level Zoom working agreements. So we've all been on Zoom for a little while. It would be helpful for me if you could use the raise hand feature that I can track. And that's at the bottom of your screen. There should be reactions, and there's a broad bar that says raise hand. Keep yourself on mute, so unless you're speaking, so that we don't get a lot of background noise. This is a general slide, so you all probably know each other, but you can remind us of who you are before you speak. And you can also enter questions in the chat box. If you have a really pressing question and want to be able to pay attention to the presentation, put it in the chat and I'll come back to it when we go to the Q&A portions. And just be collaborative, and sounds like you all, I know that you all work together often, be open-minded and here to learn. So with that all being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mark Els, your town manager, and he's going to give an overview of the strategic plan. We'll have Q&A, and then after that, we'll get into the specific priority areas. Mark?
Thank you, Sophie. Welcome. We just had a quick introduction just before the meeting. So thank you, Sophie, for taking the time with me. And Mark Els, town manager, thank you, President Levesque and Vice President Jeff, for allowing me to give the overview and then to, in summary, review your priority areas, goals, and strategies. Right up front in the purpose, I know that it's been said maybe twice already, but we're really trying to go over what our strategic plan is, how we use it, and then get into some of the details. I'll say that it's critical for an organization that they have a strategic plan. The successful organizations, public or private, that have good strategic plans are able to perform better than those that don't. And so it's a critical document for us as we look, and by the word strategic, we're talking beyond a year, and more the tactical side of it is what we do in a year, any given year. So I think we'll talk a little bit about how our strategic plan relates back to some of our major efforts, such as budget planning, and the time lines that are associated with that. Again, as well as getting into the priority area. So I'll move into a PowerPoint here. See. Can you see that?
We see the back end
Yes.
with your
You, so
index
you,
on the left.
you can see the PowerPoint at this point.
We see the presenter view.
You see me. Okay, let me give it.
No, the presenter view, meaning you can still see the slides on the side
Okay, okay.
screen.
Thank you.
If you want to expand it, yes.
Yeah. All right, how's that?
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Okay, so as introduced, I'm here to do the overview relevant to what strategic planning is, how we use it, etc. So, a strategic plan is a written document that points the way forward for your organization. It both lays out your organization's goals and explains why they're important. The strategic planning process also helps you uncover ways to improve performance. It really defines the purpose through its mission statement and priority areas for which we exist and function. And I'll just say that I think the work of yourselves and your predecessors has been excellent. I think you have a very good mission statement, and we'll go to get into a little detail there in a second. But and I think certainly your goals and strategies are appropriate, have been appropriate, and will be as we move forward in updating this. It applies to our whole organization. When we get into how it's used, we take your strategic plan and the vision and the guidance that it provides us, and we make sure that when we bring in our capital budgets, our operating budget, and the programs, services, and projects that we deliver, that they reflect what our council has provided us in the strategic plan. And that's what I mean by it's incorporated into our budget development process. It's actually found in both of our documents, and we've been doing this and utilizing it in that manner for well over a decade. Gives guidance to our staff and how we organizationally structure, and again, operating in capital budget. So it's a critical document, and as you all know, we have clear timelines relevant to budget planning and budget, bringing budgets before town council and dates by which they need to be approved by council. So one of the important, milestones that I think Vice President Schnepp may have alluded to it earlier. One of the important issues is for us to make sure we sync up the town council's strategic planning and those budget process. For example, right now we're already in the middle of capital planning and getting ready. We already have the instructions, but getting ready to embark on operation planning for FY24. So it would be a concurrent effort to help us if there are major changes from the existing strategic plan that you or your predecessors had put in place. So we certainly should look at that as we move into 24. Where it becomes most effective is for us for 25, 26. Because by September of next year, we will have commenced the 25 budget. And we always look at least in 2-year windows, if not 5, relevant to how we're proceeding. So that's one of the things that I think we really need to take a look at as we move forward. And I think, again, the council leadership alluded to this, but at this point, we always seem to be running concurrent with those strategic plans. They'd be most beneficial to have them so that as we move into the budget, we would know the priorities. Also knowing that you have to adapt because things change. No better example than the last 24 months, 36 months. So our priorities focus on your mission statement to protect the town of Barnstable's quality of life, unique character, engaging our citizens, and to respond and anticipate the needs of our community through sound financial management, open communication that engages our public, and with equitable balance of resource allocation to improve the quality of life for our residents, businesses, and visitors. The challenge is always balance and making sure that we do this in a way that's reflective not only of those priorities, but those changing priorities, and making sure that anything we do is adaptable to that changing environment. Static planning documents don't work. And again, no better illustration than the last 36 months. Your guidance has really focused us in on a thought process relevant to quality of life, with 7 major priority areas in public health and safety, education, infrastructure and assets, natural environment, natural resources, regulatory process and performance, economic development and housing, and surrounding that and critical to the success of us being able to prioritize those focus on the goals and move forward with strategies is a sound financial base and good communication. And so that's really reflected in what you've provided your staff in your mission statement and what you describe as that wheel that lays out those priorities. So we're going to come back to these priority areas later. But again, finance, communication, economic development, environmental and natural resources, regulatory process and performance, public health and safety, housing, infrastructure and assets, and education. And in doing this together in a partnership between our legislative and our administrative bodies in Barnstable, you all formulate and enact policy relevant to it. And we, the administrative side, implement and manage programs to achieve those policy goals. And I pared back a little bit the presentation that I originally prepared because I embarked on trying to give multiple illustrations of that, but I think for the sake of time at this point, I'll stay more succinct in what I say. And certainly we have our directors here to be able to support any specific discussion. And if you want to get into general examples, I'm ready for that as well. But the town council and town manager must communicate frequently to ensure accountability to our residents in Barnstable that we are moving forward with those priorities. That's a quick overview of our strategic planning, how we use it, and again, I threw in there trying to make sure that the timing of these very important planning documents work with how we're going to use it, which is in preparation of operating capital budget. At this point, I guess I'll stop and turn it back to Sophie for any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Els. So at this point, Town Manager Els just gave an overview of what the strategic plan is, how it's used. And I want to check in with everyone. Does this align with your understanding of the strategic plan? Do you have any questions? Was any of this a big surprise for you? And again, CBI is documenting your comments and questions so that it can be utilized when you do the strategic planning in the future. Any questions or comments, councilors?
I just want to make note that Councilor Neary has joined us.
Welcome, Councilor Neary. Councilor Ludke?
Yeah, I think that was a great overview. I think it's really important. I'm glad we're talking about that because a plan is not of much value unless it has the constraints of the fiscal availability. So I think that's really important that we're going to wait and we're going to dovetail with that because every plan has constraints. I mean, money is one of them and maybe regulatory pressure is another. I know we're under great pressure on the sewer program. And I think we're doing an amazing job. I think anybody would say we are, but that certainly is taking a preponderance of our budget. And I would like to see as we go forward to look at that as a constraint. And I would think perhaps as we go forward, I mean, all of those on that on the wheel looked equal. Perhaps a weighting exercise on how you weight maybe the relative importance of some of those. In particular, I'm thinking housing. I mean, certainly the water quality has weighted the sewer program, but maybe the housing situation could be weighted in an equal way. I mean, I'd like to have maybe you explore, Sophie, how you weight things so that you're not equal. I mean, that we'll look equal. That's kind of my question. Is the fiscal constraints are absolutely critical? And how do you weight things? Not everything is equal. It can't be, or you really can't focus on things.
Great, thank you, Councilor Ledke. So I'm hearing a question of how are the different elements weighted in the strategic plan because there are so many different elements. And I think that might become a little bit more apparent as Mr. Els goes into his presentation of each of the items. And also we're taking note of that to inform the future strategic planning conversations. Are there any other clarifying questions or comments from the councilors? And one thing that I heard in conversations with Councilor Schnepp and with Mr. Els was the importance of the roles of the town council and the city manager, or excuse me, the town manager. Councilor Schnepp, would you like to speak to that a little bit as well before we move on?
Sure. As we know, as elected officials, we are the legislative body. We are to set policy, but we're not the ones who are going to figure out all the ins and outs of implementing that policy. But I think in terms of us being clear with those policies, if Mark and his staff are, not sure what we're trying to accomplish, then this planning process is where we really need to articulate that. And in deference to Councillor Lepke's comment, if we need to show that certain areas might have a stronger priority for us, then we probably do need to, in future plans, make that more explicit.
Great, thank you, Councillor Schnapp. Any other questions before we move on to the specific priority areas? Okay, Mr. Ells, let's move on. And then after each one of the priority areas, we'll go for questions and comments.
Now, when I go, do I need to reshare the presentation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
And Mr. Ells, as you go through, if you want to keep in mind Councillor Lutke's question about prioritization and, what big piece of, how big of each piece of the pie each of these areas takes, that would probably be helpful as well.
From our standpoint, your vision and, certainly the focus on quality of life is the overriding factor, not any project, program, or service. It may seem that way because we talk so much about a particular issue, especially publicly. And making sure, I think you hit right on the head, Councillor, when you said making sure that we have sound financial planning in place. That's why we do talk as much and we do evaluate as much, and it's appropriate to start with, a strategic priority area or financial, but sound financial is critical. And I don't even know if it's second by being able to communicate effectively with all those that it may impact. So that's really how we look at it. As far as weighting, it's a matter of balancing discretionary, non-discretionary, essential, non-essential, regulatory requirements versus other, while we're trying to come up with a way to provide that quality of life that all of our residents are here for. And, there are certainly common themes like water resources, certainly, like our people, certainly. And by our people, I mean our residents, our visitors, and our business people. So that's how we do it. There isn't a weighting, quite honestly. We're going to have some tough discussions about infrastructure, specifically wastewater, but that hasn't dominated certainly our general funded operating budget at this point. It is in the forefront of discussion, and we're going to have to make some big decisions in the next 2 to 3 fiscal years. But, I think that going back to what you've given us guidance on and what from a management standpoint we implement, having finance as one of our most essential priorities is key to keeping that front and center as we move forward, as well as communication. So I hope I answered that. We don't have a weighting at this point. We focus on the broader purpose and vision that you provide us with, and then try to bring forward professional management approaches to everything from, human factors to, infrastructure issues. So it's a challenge, as you can imagine. That's why balance is a big challenge. How do you do all that with the limited resource and the support of our public? So at this point, I think I'll jump into the first priority area, which is financial. Now, remember, these are goals and strategies that you as a council or your predecessors established for us. They're what Mark Milne and myself and Andy Clyburn and all of the directors look at, and they take into account with every budget they bring forward, with every program and service we offer. We look at the outcomes that result from focusing on these goals and strategies, and we will describe them as accomplishments in every budget document that we publish, that you receive each year. But if you want to get even more finite, we can actually try to link them back, though I don't know that that's of high value. It's more of an academic exercise, but certainly maybe valuable in certain areas. So I'll read it. Provide a viable financial plan for meeting the operational and capital needs of the town with a balanced budget that includes ongoing cost reductions, cost savings for residents, maintaining reserves, and aggressively pursuing new growth dollars and revenue sources. And as you look at each of these, I know I have 40 minutes now to go over the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But there is so much built into this that's already been established as guidance, and by guidance, in many cases, policies by yourself or your predecessors. One, for example, reserve. Council has a policy for us of a 4% reserve, and Mark Milne's here if you want to get into the details of that. I don't recommend it because I think that might merit a whole separate discussion and workshop. But so much of this has built upon itself over the last 2 decades that we've been doing this. And again, I think you have really good vision, really good purpose, excellent goals and strategies. And we've already taken these, we're using them in development of the 24 budget. And once we get an updated one, that's what we'll use. Perhaps concurrent with 24, or definitely moving into 25, 26. The strategies to support that goal in finance, explore and create new growth dollars and revenue sources for the town, and alleviate strain on municipal and school budgets, perform operational auditing, advance greater efficiencies, and stimulate new growth. I mean, there's lots of ways that we look to do this. And again, that single strategy alone has both, outcomes that have been desired by council that have led us in certain directions relevant to current assets that we have, and perhaps disposition of those, as well as entertaining, hosting other new infrastructure. Lots of different issues there that I think the council, especially the newer councilors, would probably benefit by a more in-depth discussion. Ensure adherence to sound financial plan to meet short-term and long-term priorities and liabilities for our operating budget and capital needs of the town. Evaluate and assess on an ongoing basis alternative methods to decrease the cost of service by exploring the financial benefits of regionalization, consolidation, privatization, and collective bargaining, and to support and promote open budget. Some of these, though, we're already doing. Some of them we don't do, and we probably won't do. And so that's the sort of, when we get into this subsequent discussion of these, either now or in the spring session, we should talk about. I mean, we are supporting open budget. We have done that for many years. And we do promote it on our website and with our residents. I don't know that that needs to be a primary strategy any longer. We've been doing that successfully now for, I'd have to defer to Mark Milne on certainly years. I don't know if it's more than a decade. On the other hand, the prior bullet, privatization. People use that word, but what that means is you're selling public resources to the private sector so that now they offer the service. We really don't frequently do that. And so certainly looking at contract ops like we did within the Hyannis water system, that's not privatization. That's not selling it to the private sector. So I think this sort of guidance, we can spend time refining at these future discussions, because again, when Mark Milne and I sit down specifically on finance, we look at these, we pull these up, and we look to achieve them in the budget for which we're using this guidance, or for the next probably 2 to 3 years. So it's really important that we take the time to make it accurate at some point. But again, the outline, excellent. It gives us great guidance. So, Sophie and council, I reviewed the first priority area. I'm going to stop here, but I want to ask you a question. Is this what you want me to do with each one? Because that's basically how we've laid this out. And I defer to you, Sophie, and certainly town council on what's most beneficial for you. More than happy to go through each. The next one's communication.
Yeah, I think it can be helpful for folks to hear, each of the pieces. I heard you saying that you're looking for a little bit more refinement. It would be helpful to have more refinement in future planning discussions next year, and more in-depth discussion so that there's more education for the newer counselors, particularly around revenue sources. Is that accurate?
Around each and every, because again, no one isn't more important than the other. I think without finance and communication, though, we won't be very successful with the others, but there isn't really one that's more important than the other. They're all important.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Schnapp has her hand up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Sophie. Mark, the period of this strategic plan is pretty much almost exclusively during COVID. So there's been a lot of changes in how our town operates. Primarily, we have a lot of staff that is now, a lot of people working from home, not having to go in the office as much. Do you see that as something that has a financial impact on the town, or a future financial impact in terms of our space needs, our technology needs, our ability to recruit personnel?
Yes, and all of it. Certainly nothing that's happening in Barnstable isn't happening nationwide and even beyond in some cases. So we're trying to provide, and many of the upfront slides I had shared with you, you probably know it all, but I mean, when we're looked at from the outside, bond rating agencies, being an international destination, I mean, we function at a high standard here. So, and it's expected, for us relative to the quality of life for our residents. So everything that you've said is required, not just because of COVID, but because society and the workplace are changing. And so, yes, all of that's critical. Will it impact budget? Absolutely. Do we have the guidance from our town council and its vision and its goals to manage that? Yes. Yes. And I think, I talked to Sophie earlier about this a little bit, and I think the one thing that might be missing, and it's not related to strategic planning, is discussions on an annual basis, flipping it over and having myself and my subordinate staff talk to you about our operational plans and tactics, because you need to know that this is essential for us to focus our time and effort and resources on those things that you have taken the time to say to us are a priority. And then you need to hear back from us all the things we're doing to achieve that.
So back and
that'd be another workshop and another discussion.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Schnapp. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Councillor Rapcorsetti.
Thank you so much. Mark, were you going to touch at all about the our guidance with regards to finance that's in the strategic plan? Because that's kind of as I recall, it was our narrative. But well, let me back up, because Paula mentioned the fact that we don't want to tell you how to achieve these, but at the same time, we have offered guidance with regards to finance. And are you prepared to go into that at all, or is that something that will end up being eliminated from the strategic plan?
Well, first of all, it's your strategic plan. So I think anything that you feel is important, we're here to understand it, and we're here to incorporate it in what we're doing, whether it's short term or long. So, but so you're talking about the gray area.
Yes, the town council guidance.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, certainly Mark Milne looks at that, as we do in every area where you've provided that guidance. I think that. So, are you looking for me to provide?
Well, I think what I'm looking for is I'm looking for. I think this is great to be able to take a look at the current plan and assess what we've accomplished or what's deficient about it. So I just want to make sure that the new counselors and everybody is aware that there is more to the financial section of the strategic plan, and that's the council guidance on the finance that we provided. And I think we did that under each category, provided some guidance.
Yes. Well, certainly under finance, you had what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 areas: impacts of COVID, new business growth, auditing for best practices, cost sharing, cost savings, equitable resource allocations. And then you give a general description of what you envision that as being. And we've interpreted that as the guidance that it's labeled as, which is, we take that under consideration as we move forward with looking at whether it's some of the functions. So again, this is a town council document, so I'll point one out: cost savings. You're identifying independent fire and water districts, not something within town manager or staff purview at all. No authority in that area. So I guess in that case, when we look at that, we say, okay, this is the town council strategic plan. It's up to the town council to discuss this. So that isn't always the case, though. I mean, certainly the question that Councilor Schnepp asked me about, okay, Mark, how did COVID impact us, and how did the world changing impact us, relevant to our space needs, relevant to technology, relevant to our employees? That's all things that we have adapted to, and we're continually modifying, whether it's allowing for remote work, whether it's digitizing millions of records, so that now our remote staff and our customer can access those records to do business that way in a contactless world of providing public service. Those are two, and all of the technology advancements. We don't talk much about the cyber challenges that we have, but they're real, and cybersecurity is huge. We see it at we see it at the RTA. We see it at the state and the college level. It happens to us from time to time, but that's another major area that we need to get into. So I think I'm answering your question very generally, but yes, we look at that guidance. I really wasn't completely clear on how far you wanted me to read into each of these items on your behalf.
I don't need you to read at all, but I guess it's more for the edification of the new counselors too, just so they understand that there is a little bit of narrative that the council provided with regards to guidance on each of these goals and or each of these parts of the wheel, if you will. So, but no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Because I can see that will change mostly.
We put the entire document in our budget, both capital and off. We look at all of it, including the guidance. But for the sake of tonight, I guess I was unclear on how far you wanted me to present your strategic plan. So I stopped at goals and strategies. That's all.
Thanks,
Great.
Mark.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. President Levesque and then Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Council Rep Cassetti, because I was going to touch on that that subject as well, is that there is town council guidance. And I think that in some ways, as town manager Els had mentioned, there's some ideas in a lot of ways too. What happened with the strategic plan is some ideas or the popcorn thinking, instead of it being processed and kind of evaluated in the possibility, it just ended up in the plan. For example, whether independent fire water districts could place where cost savings could be pursued. We have no jurisdiction there per se. So that could be something that, the idea of that it really doesn't line up with our priorities necessarily. So again, this is kind of another reason why we're here to talk about what really is in a strategic plan, that the broader view of vision, as it kind of touched upon earlier, and that also the idea, but there are, again, good points in there. We always talk about new business growth. Another type of, who knew, and there's so many things because it's fluid. We had no idea what CARES Act money, ARPA funds, infrastructure bill funds, all the types of things that were coming down the pike that were going to affect our financial situation and how we use those funds, and what was actually, what we were able to use those funds for. And some of that wasn't really clear from the state legislature or the federal government or whatever it might be. So again, I don't want to get too far into the mud, but at the same time, again, I think it's important that, again, for all the council to understand, and I'm not trying to be contradictory to anything that anybody else has said. It's just important that, we concentrate on the things that we do have control over. And we focus on the things that we can point direction to, in clear direction to our administration. So in some of these things, it is clear, some of it not so clear. And again, some of it's just basically changed. We're out of COVID. We don't necessarily, the challenges that are coming out of COVID become clearer and more clear each and every day. So as those things move forward, and even equitable resource allocation, if we even just look at our sewer project, that's very difficult to do because it's got to start somewhere. So right now we're focusing on Centerville and Hyannis, and eventually we'll make our ways to other areas and things of that nature. So again, it's a fluid process. So it's important, I think, not to define that, because then it looks like we're not doing what we outlined in the strategic plan. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, President. Mr. Ellis, did you have any response to that?
No, I don't. I guess my only question would be relevant to finance, Sophie. What sort of additional comment were you thinking you might obtain here?
For this section?
Yeah.
Well, I think that we're just hearing, this being the first of the different priority areas, I think we're sort of getting a little bit of a catch-all of comments around the plan, and that's perfectly fine. We were thinking around 10 minutes for each section, but we knew that finance and communications would be sort of larger topics that would take more general comments. And so as we move down the line, I think that we'll move a little bit more quickly through economic development, environment and natural resources, regulatory process, and performance. I mean, I would turn to President Levesque and Councillor Schnepp and ask if there was more specific feedback that you all wanted in this section in particular.
I only saw Councilor Neary's hand up.
Yeah, we'll
But
definitely.
yeah, I don't think there needs to necessarily comments, questions. I think if we go through that, again, I think it's coming out organically what ideas we have, or again, it's just a good discussion.
Yeah, great, thank you, Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, fellow councilors and staff. And first off, I apologize for being tardy to this strategic plan overview. Just a couple quick comments. I've learned over time that much like forecasting, things like a strategic plan, they capture a moment in time. And as I pulled up the strategic plan a couple of weeks ago to re-review it, let's just say, knowing that the town and staff and members look at this as a blueprint for what the council is looking to do in the town, it becomes obvious right off, almost immediately that many of the items have been addressed. Many of the items need not apply. And going forward, I guess my question would be, should we be looking at this overview and frankly, deleting some of the line items? I mean, my particular profession, I have a lot of interaction with the town in regards to online processes. Those things have taken place. Back to reiterate what Council President Levesque indicated and Vice President Schnapp and also Councilor Raposetti, there are some items on the strategic plan, I think when they were originally founded, that these were things that we would like to incorporate, but frankly, in the big picture of things, we're looking for responsiveness from the town. We're looking for communication from the town. Sometimes it's easier just to say, bah, instead of bah, 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 bah. When you look at this, it becomes cumbersome. And I think that in some ways, especially when the town manager is looking at this document, it can get fragmented. I mean, it's much easier to be, let's call it laser focused on a small amount of things instead of having this wide swath. And much of the things that we're looking to do, frankly, they're common sense. They may not be easy to achieve, but in that regard, they're a top of mind, and we know what needs to be done. But in a lot of instances, as we work our way through this document, there's a lot of words in here that maybe, let's just say, are overstated. So I guess my wish or my hope would be that maybe there'll be some culling of some of this stuff. And, let's focus on the stuff that can be attained. Let's focus on the stuff in terms of long range plans. But I think we should be looking at maybe trying to make this a more concise, more, again, laser focused document that makes it much more accessible and much more the town, the management to attain these. Let's keep it on the key points as opposed to getting into the reads. I guess that would be my comment. Again, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Neary. Councilor Collin?
Yes, thank you. I guess I agree with Councilor Neary, but I'm going to say it a little differently. And that is that I like bullet points for a strategic plan and not specific tasks given. I think we have a professional staff. We've seen it 1,000 times over and over and over every year, AAA bond rating, on and on and on. We can go on and on and on about it. And I really feel like it's very much a hands-off, nose-in position that we have, not being an authority on finance, for instance, but trusting Mark Milne, not being an authority on, our entire municipal government, but trusting Mark Els to do that for us, not knowing where all the pipes are in the ground, but trusting Dan Santos and his team. So I just think that this got a little bit into the weeds. I will quote Paul on that. That's very accurate. And I'd like to see kind of a more bare bones approach that's more conceptual and puts emphasis where those concepts need to be fortified, i.e. communication. How's that for a segue?
Excellent. So conceptual visioning, high level, and trust the staff to get into the weeds and the details and make the specific planning. Okay, let's move on to communication.
Okay. Thank you. Mark Ellis back again. All right, so another priority area, communication. We've talked about the importance of this in finance already. Improve communication amongst the town council and town manager and their staff, amongst the town councils, between the town, its residents, boards, commissions, volunteers, and visitors to foster a participative and positive results that meet the needs of the community. Guess if I had to throw a word in there, having served for a long time with us, our diverse community, and our community is ever changing. When I read through your strategies of provide regular opportunity for town council members to receive briefings or updates on town initiatives and other important topics from the town manager and department heads, I mean, we try to do that on many fronts. One of the more simple methods has been, we really morphed what was a town manager report that was kind of, the nice things that were going on in the community to a business report for what we're doing and what the priorities are. And you get that at the beginning or during your town council meetings. We post them online so that anybody can find these and at least have a feeling for what we're talking about, when we started talking about it, and why it's important. Everything from drinking water quality to housing to, police reform. So, that's one simple example that having you set this strategy, that shows how important that is. You said to us, this is a priority. We take it serious in doing the business of the town. Use the council liaison system to improve communication between town committees, boards, commissions, encourage regular updates from those liaisons to town council. Now, Jessica Rapcasetti, again, this is one of those that is kind of internal to the council. Town manager doesn't really have authority, nor am I involved in the appointment of, most boards, committees, commissions. So I think that's an opportunity for council to say, okay, this is important. Have we been talking about this? Is this, appointments committee very well may, but I think that's really important. Like later on, we're going to talk about education. And I know that the school committee is heading into strategic planning for our public schools. The liaison relationship with our public schools through our town councilors who've taken that assignment, that's critical. Because you're going to hear right up front and center, what their priorities are, and they're tasked with doing that. They're elected officials and tasked with developing that for the town. And we'll talk about that later. But all opportunities for us to continue to look at this and utilize it. And again, they're really good. Quite honestly, they're effective. Utilize existing communications boards and partner media outlets to make public service announcements. Work with community groups to disseminate information to their members. I mean, Lynn Poyon was separated out of playing really a community role to a communications role, and that's what she helps us do. That was a result of this specific strategy. It doesn't stop there. One thing I will say about communication, it's my belief that from the day I became an adult, then a professional, till the time I'm no longer that, I need to learn how to be a better communicator. So there is no end to this. It's a constant struggle to add value, to be more effective. And your prioritization of this and our understanding of that, we're not perfect. We never will be, but we continue to try to be the best communicators that we can be. You identified to us our diverse community. We're in the process of bringing on a translator on staff. We're down to finalists at this point. They'll be an active part of our communication process to assist us. Now, that's just one very small thing that results with a comprehensive communication plan, but it's really important to know that that's important for our community, and we're going to commit the resources to be able to do that. Utilize the town website. I mean, again, certainly, you've seen a modification to our website. It will continue to evolve more based on how the users want to use it and access information than what is convenient for us, certainly. And I think our staff does a good job in being able to offer that. Encourage all boards and commissions to record their proceedings and make them available to foster communication. Increase transparency. Without saying, I mean, again, this guidance is given to us. We do this regularly. It's not a matter of are we required to do it. We know that it makes us better communicators, therefore we do it. Develop tactics to effectively solicit public input and promote active engagement. Again, constantly under assessment, development, and improvement. And I expect that as long as I'm your town manager, we'll be in that mode. We'll be looking for continuous improvement in our communication because it's required. Okay, that's Sophie, back to you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on how the town manager and his staff are utilizing the communications section of the strategic plan? Counselor Cullum.
Not a question as much as a comment. I look forward to tweaking, especially this particular part of the strategic plan. I know there's other counselors that are like-minded with me, and I know that from Mark's comments, he's committed to changing certain things to make this a more inclusive municipality, really. So I look forward to that. And as you said, Mark, I mean, a lot of this stuff is stuff that's already taking place, but we still continue to miss the mark on communication. So I think it's just going to be one of these things that we never perfect probably, but we keep working at forever. And as people shift and their priorities shift, we just need to stick and move and try to be better about it. But what I'm going to propose, and I know I have the support of many of you, my fellow counselors, is that we make a concerted effort to build bridges with community members that we haven't had relationships with in the past, and get their representation in our lawmaking. So I look forward to that, and that'll be next time, I suppose.
Thank you, Counselor. And so I am taking notes primarily about the questions you have and your understanding about the strategic plan, and a little bit on your suggestions, but also I suggest to each of you as the counselors to be keeping your own notes that you will be able to look back at when you address the strategic planning together next year. Are there any other questions or comments about the communication priority area? Okay, let's move right along.
Actually, before I move, Sophie, I know but you said these two were going to take time, so thank you. So there is guidance there for us from our town council, and I can go through each, but right up front, they were looking for some new positions. One, a volunteer coordinator, the other, the grants coordinator. The grants coordinator is hired. That person is in place working for us. The volunteer coordinator, because of the way we use volunteers, this is actually already tasked to all our directors. So if you feel as though, and the way that Ann Quirk, our town clerk, uses a volunteer versus our chief of police versus our DPW director or our community services director, it is very different. Time-wise, it is very different. What their ability level is very different. So in us reviewing this, and I appreciate you allowing it to go down to that operational level, we don't believe that hiring one centralized individual is the way to go with it. We do recognize that making it a priority at our director level, given that different type of use of volunteers, we believe the more effective way to do this. So, and if we find gaps, I mean, recently, Councilor Clark has been asking questions relevant to accessing certain tax, volunteering, relevant if you're a veteran or you're a senior that's eligible for, tax credit. And so we'll better illustrate where that can happen and when that can happen and the types of people we will need that would qualify for that, just so when our public looks for it, they can find it more easily. So that all of that, but that's a result of you making this a priority. You have other areas in here relevant to the various audiences, different modes of communication, and accessibility to participation. So certainly it's a constant focus for us. Councilor Cullum's right. It's always going to be a work in progress. But and anytime you see us not being successful in what you've tasked us with, we're there to hear it and to respond to it, and hopefully respond successfully.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Ellis.
you. Okay. guess I'll move on here.
Mhm.
Economic development. Town council and town managers to support and grow a vibrant economy and a diverse business, both profit and nonprofit, and a strong labor force. Continue to support zoning and regulatory committee to determine any zoning changes that may result in legislative action, as well as economic development task force to address economic resiliency. I think probably those both need to be looked at by the town council at this point. Again, not really something staff can do, but certainly town council should revisit that specific strategy as to, it's not that it isn't a priority, but how do we want to approach that? Identify and encourage redevelopment of underutilized or blighted properties, an active effort by our planning department, town manager to work proactively to retain or expand existing businesses and to attract new ones, with innovative approaches such as providing economic incentives, creating marketing, specifically to attract desirable new businesses to Barnstable, to create or deepen connections between local educational institutions and businesses. Yes, we are actively doing that. Our planning and development department has staff specifically dedicated to that. But more broadly, the town manager's office, the finance office, our understanding that even through our DPW, identifying long-term infrastructure needs sets the table for economic development. We understand that. That's why we have the capital improvement program and the dedicated funds that we have that direct a mill at least annually, if not more, shares and reviews with our council, because infrastructure sets the table for how we will proceed in this area. It is a priority for us. And when we begin to touch on the fringes of that, our planning and development department has developed new websites, continually establishes relationships, looks for incentives, even internal to us or externally. I mean, certainly we've had that opportunity recently with various stimulus funds, but this is an active effort. And again, we'll continue to evolve depending, I mean, we're seeing a more diverse provision of services now, both regulatory and economic development. What you voted on recently to allow for a person in their home to conduct business in what, almost half of our town, is an example of our attention to this and how we go forward with recognizing the workplace and the need of our residents and businesses, and trying to come up with solutions that allow for us to maintain that purpose, that quality of life in our community. There's also a little bit of guidance here, and some of it is town council based guidance. Relationship with the community college, a very active discussion, both with our school department and our community college and our other regional educational entities. I mean, we are the educational center for the region, and helping our community college to maintain its student population and to enhance its educational opportunities, either through curriculum or facilities or just the general the environment at our community college is critical for our success as being the center of the region for education. So that is active. I regularly meet with the president and his vice presidents. I serve on multiple committees there, as does my other staff, and certainly the school superintendent will do that as she moves forward, as she's new. So she's got to develop that relationship.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Els.
Yep.
Are there questions or comments about how the town manager's office uses this section of the strategic plan? Economic development. Yes, Councilor Cullum.
Sorry to keep talking, not really, just kidding. But this particular thing I feel very strongly about, that it really, we can only we can only work with willing partners, but I feel like collaboration is the way of the future when it comes to not only Cape Cod Community College, but the YMCA, like these other entities in our community that may not be reaching out their hands to us to work with them. But I feel there's a huge collaborative opportunity there. And I think part of the planning should be thinking about what we do when a door of opportunity opens in those spots, like how we're going to fill that void with HAC, with these other big entities that we have around town, not just educational ones. So I feel strongly about that. I like the way it's coming along. I wish for more opportunity on the parts of our partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Clark.
Thank you very much. I understand how this presentation was developed from our previous strategic plan, but I believe that the Economic Development Task Force has been sunsetted and is no longer a sitting committee. So I understand the work that they did, but I think that's not in place at this time. Just thought I'd make that point.
Yeah, thank you. And so that kind of information will definitely be included in the update in the coming year. And it sounds like there's a little bit of a need in future strategic planning, maybe to have ongoing reflection of and maybe ongoing reports back on goals that have been achieved throughout the year. Okay, Councilor Schnepp.
Thank you. I wanted to add on to Councilor Cullum's list of collaborations. I think that's a great way to look at how we can really leverage who's already in our town and who are potential creators of economic development. And we are the home base for the healthcare system, for Cape Cod healthcare. And I think there are possible opportunities that, we want to explore as part of our economic development strategies. So again, I know that's not our point this evening, but I just wanted to tack that on and have that in the notes.
Great. Partnerships for economic opportunities. Thank you. Any other questions about economic development in the strategic plan and how it's utilized by the town manager's office? Okay, moved on. Environment and natural resources.
All right, natural resources. Conserve and protect areas in town that are most significant as natural and historical resources for water supply, visual quality, outdoor recreation, public access, wildlife habitat, and cultural history. And the strategies include implement the comprehensive dredge plan, investigate innovative cost-effective techniques for invasive species control, investigate innovative techniques and legislative options to address beach erosion and other prepare and adapt to extreme weather events, support programs that emphasize environmental protection while ensuring economic development as articulated in the regional policy plan. So I'm not sure how often the council, has the occasion to get into what that would direct us. Raise awareness of conservation areas and town-owned open space. Establish management maintenance plans for conservation areas and town-owned open space. Work in conjunction with federal, state, regional, and local agencies to protect critical environmental areas, including fragile coastlines, marine embayment areas, and all water bodies vulnerable to, I would say, our impact, not just nutrient loading, because there's a lot more than just nitrogen there. So, but that's my personal comment. My only observation on this is these strategies are almost objectives if you put a date and a time on it. So yeah, maybe we want to look and make sure big picture For me, the environmental and natural resources challenges we have are great. It links into water quality. One of the reasons why we choose to live or recreate or do business here, critical to quality of life in Barnstable. And I think thinking about strategies, big picture, that would help us to balance a challenge like open space versus economic development would be a really interesting exercise to have without a project driving the discussion. Because I think from that, we could really establish strategies, big picture, long-term strategies that'll help us when the next issue comes forward. Okay, it's like, it's intellectual, not emotional when you do it that. I think that's a great benefit to all of us when we can do. That concludes my, I'm just looking to see if I have natural resource guidance. Sorry, I don't see any. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it. So, okay, thank you.
Counselor Rossetti.
Thank you. I don't think we provided any guidance on that one.
Okay.
But this is kind of an overall question. We're going through the update of the LCP. How is that going to get incorporated? How is our strategic plan going to work with the updating of the LCP?
I think that they have been treated as separate planning documents in the past.
So we don't.
I don't recommend that. I do not recommend that.
Okay.
I think that is a mistake. I think that, you're doing a 10-year look at land use in Barnstable. Land use crosses over into every single one of these priority areas. So I think that having Director Jenkins' understanding of our strategic plan, and for us to have, constructive discussions about where our strategic plan's going, a little longer look than a 2-year strategic, but again, making sure that we're adapting them. That's the problem. You plan, Mark Miller and I talk about all this all the time about this, about, 8 years from now, what we had projected and how does it look? Are we close? And mostly related to finance. So, and actually, he's amazing that we're pretty close. But I think that's a difficult challenge for Director Jenkins. But I think she's knowing of this, and I think that it needs to be a clear link between what we're doing strategically in your strategic plan and what our local comprehensive plan reflects. Director Jenkins and I are having those conversations. I would recommend that we have her come in a separate discussion and talk about that and how the two would most effectively dovetail and remain concurrent and up to date with each other.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, President Levesque.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you. That's a great question, Councilor Rossetti, and this has been an ongoing conversation. And really, with this introduction of what we're this exercise of what we're doing here, and the fact that we have this local comprehensive plan that was processed, that's been put in place, this is an opportunity to get those things to synergize and be work together moving forward, and again, getting this strategic plan really mapped out specifically so that it can affect the outcome of the local comprehensive plan, so that again, they're working together moving forward in parallel. And so that it has been a discussion at the leadership level with Town Manager Els, myself, and Councilor Schnepp, trying to map this out moving forward. So, and also to comment on the fact that the guidance on the environmental and natural resources, I think that guidance actually kind of made its way into the strategies. So again, something that we can look at moving forward, that maybe it won't be so specific in regards to task orientated as again ops based, as Mark had previously mentioned. So Though, again, priority is just the same, but just something that would probably maybe more speaking in general than specifics in task orientated bullet points. Thank you.
I would just throw out for Sophie, if I might, Sophie, here or maybe later even in infrastructure, but you know, we have, and I think you know, it was pointed out earlier to us about the focus on the wastewater issue. Yes, absolutely, it's been a focus. It's also been focus that's regulatory and lawsuit driven. Lakes and ponds and our freshwater bodies, not so much, but it's coming up fast. So if you could just note that in our water resources, we're well versed in water supply because we live on top of the water we drink. We're focused on wastewater, but I think we really need to also think about those other water resources that aren't nitrogen impacted, but might be phosphorus impacted and certainly longer term emerging contaminant impacted. But somehow, I don't know where you put this, but these are the issues of the future that will be, you know, hugely challenging for any community in doing their strategic plan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Councillor Cullen.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that this is another opportunity for all of that collaboration that I was talking about before, as in HAC and the Association to Preserve Cape Cod and their whole smart growth maps about where we actually plot housing and what open space actually is, because I think that's a really big point of confusion for people. But this particular thing with the environment and natural resources really pulls together a bunch of the big players in our community. So I just wanted to point that out. There's a lot of these concepts that kind of just, they're like woven through the entire strategic plan. There's common threads, and this is one of them. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, any more questions about environment and natural resources? Great, let's move on to regulatory process and performance, and then we'll take a break.
Okay. Work with town manager and staff to have efficient, customer-friendly, predictable regulatory process. Reevaluate the permitting process, including policies, rules, regulations, personnel, customer and citizens' experiences, and impacts on economic growth. Identify necessary change. Again, an effort that is continuous. I see our inspectional services director and our planning and development director constantly looking at this, constantly. We're also, given the shift from people and in-person service relevant to the regulatory process to some aspects being remote, we're adapting to that change. We're looking at those efficiencies. We're making sure that there isn't duplication of effort or unnecessary delays in issuing permits, whether it be in our Board of Health. I know that Brian Florence and Elizabeth Jenkins, Brian, our inspectional services director, Elizabeth, our planning and development director, have talked to me about the improvements they've made in the site plan review process and making it far more efficient for every applicant that comes in to move through that process. I'm more than happy to have Brian speak to it, but this is an ongoing and continuous effort. It never changes, but our marketplace has changed, and the way that we provide service has changed dramatically in 3 years. We've adapted to it well. We're issuing more permits in more areas. We're like at historic levels. I know the economy has supported that in a sense, but you know, the fact that we went remote, yeah, maybe you weren't used to it, but people are using it, and they're using it effectively. And where we find that it isn't effective, we look at the necessary changes and we try to move forward with it. So with that, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councillor Schnepp?
Thank you. 2 questions. I know we've had a conversation or two about trying to align sort of the annual permitting process for various, whether it's shellfishing or other things, so that there are just 1 or 2 times in the year instead of April, January, is that something that is ongoing now to kind of reevaluate when permits expire and when they are?
Yes, we're looking at multiple efforts. Certainly that's one of them. Because from the outside looking in, why wouldn't I want to go on once, buy all my permits, and then be done with it? Internally looking out, we're trying to utilize existing information to populate those databases so that when a person comes in, it's not as cumbersome to upload stuff that maybe we have in another database somewhere else. So we're trying to create those common platforms to do that. Sometimes, and you've seen us adapt this with the public works shifting to a fiscal year versus a calendar year fee structure. That's one quick example that it tends to do it the other way. And so we move that. Sometimes though, the odd time of year that we might issue it is related to when we've had staff availability to dedicate to it. For example, if all our people are in the field during the good weather and sticker sales happen in the late winter, early spring, and use is coming up by, let's say, the better weather, there's kind of a logical, practical reason at times why over time we've issued it at that time. So we know that you'll want to hear why we do it that way. And then ultimately, if it makes sense to modify it, we will. But definitely there's logic. Many times when I've asked those questions, my staff has taken the time and said, Mark, this is why we do it then. And most of the time there's logic here. So
This is sort of a follow-up, but what is the way that you are measuring customer satisfaction? How is it mostly complaint driven, or do you ever do any surveys to understand how to improve systems?
We haven't done like broad brush community surveys in a while. We do give out customer surveys for some of our programs and services. And those are very targeted to leisure program, or as a parent, I know I get them all the time. And I evaluate the programs we're on. But certainly, Lynn Poyant's got our communications director actually has an extensive background in this, and she could probably advise me in areas where we're behind on that. So certainly, I think that if you're aware of an area that you think we need to do it, I'm more than happy to look into it. But I'll circle back with Lynn and see where she feels as though that sort of input would be most beneficial. We do get a lot of communication from our public, whether it be through social media or, it's not always directly solicited, but sometimes it is. Sometimes we do, use like, a platform to solicit input on a specific issue and see who communicates. That kind of twists around though to Jen Cullum's statement that we got to just make sure we get everybody involved to comment on that. And we will continue to try to do that. Can't make people comment, but we can ask them to comment. And you don't ask them and you miss them, then that's a problem. So is there a specific area that you based on that question?
No, I just was, again, it's sort of that quality or continuous quality improvement, and how do you evaluate where a system, whether it's a permitting, is not.
Well, I guess in a sense, and it might be misleading, but in a sense, we're looking at our statistics and trending them over time and seeing whether the way that we provide service and the number of people who are there to provide that service. So it's more of an efficiency that we're looking at. So are we having more permits with fewer people? What's the turnaround time? That sort of thing. But I don't know that in every case we're asking our customer, how was your experience? So I'll talk with Lynn and see if there's some obvious areas we can do better at that. And just talk with my directors in general and see if there's areas that they think that would be helpful to continue to add value.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Councilor Rapresetti?
Thank you. I couldn't let this section go by, and you were talking about how you gauge how you're performing. Well, I'll be one. So I've been on the council over a decade. And when I first came on, we received complaint after complaint about, getting a permit and how slow and the people were mean. And from the first point of contact, it was just the most arduous ordeal. I've received so many compliments that I should pass along to you, but specifically to your director, the building commissioner. From the first point of contact throughout the process, I've heard it's just their online permitting process is so much better. And when you need support, someone answers the phone, and that's huge because that was not the case years ago. So, and maybe not even 3 years ago, but it has really made a remarkable turnaround. So kudos.
Well, thank you. I will bring it full circle and say to you that all my directors and their subordinate staff have your mission statement on their desk. They know it. When they get hired, I talk with them about it. I tell them, if you don't agree with this, then Barnstable isn't the right place for you. It's about the quality of life of our residents, our visitors, and our businesses. And our directors carry that forward to their workforce. So I think you're seeing the result of your good vision for us, and our directors taking this forward right down to the boots on the ground. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. Are there any other questions on the regulatory processes and performance, or any of the other areas that we've discussed? Okay, let's take a short break. Everyone come back at 8:45, please. input and reflections from about 4 or 5 of you as counselors. And I just want to encourage those of you who haven't spoken up yet to comment or ask questions, to do so moving forward. And we'll also have time at the end to go back and see if there are comments on some of the sections that we've already gone through. All right, Mr. Els. You're muted.
All right, so I need to share again, correct?
Yeah, and I think we're on public health and safety.
All right. What did I do to lose the? I think I might advance. Are we there?
Beautiful.
All right, sorry. I guess it throws me every time when we take down my shared screen. I apologize. Okay, public health and safety. The goal is to protect and promote health, safety, and high quality of life of all town residents and visitors. Support collaborative action to protect and expand our drinking water supply, including but not limited to ongoing monitoring for existing and emerging contaminants. Develop and implement a substance use prevention plan in collaboration with key stakeholders. Prevention through educating youth in schools, working with the Y Young Achievers, and leveraging recreation programs. Collaboration among community stakeholders working in substance use for a range of perspectives. Establishing appropriate oversight and support for programs and entities in Barnstable that offer treatment. And then support village-based and community-oriented public safety agencies and joint programs that police, schools, youth, seniors, disabled, homeless, and other vulnerable population programs. And other, vulnerable population programs. So that's what's been identified in that area. I didn't see any, I didn't see any guidance beyond that in the document. Certainly, well, why did I stop here and let council ask questions? Sorry.
Any questions or comments on how the public health and safety priority areas are used by Mr. L's office? Councillor Collum, and then President Levesque.
Yeah, I just would like to recognize first of all that the approach for the Hyannis filtration system for PFAS is an outstanding effort, and really one that is it's so cutting edge that, when my niece at Union College was studying PFAS in her neuroscience class, when she Googled it, Hyannis came up, Barnstable came up. So she came here and went on a tour with Hans Kaiser, and it was amazing. And so I really do appreciate that. And I also have to say, I realize that prevention is not the burden of the town entirely. And that when we venture into curriculum, which is not our purview, in some of these bullet points, and I'm pretty positive I had a lot to do with it. So I'll be revising that. Thank you.
Thank you. President Levesque.
Thank you, and I appreciate Council Combs' comments and again her really passion for health, safety, and collaboration with our school system. And I just wanted to, and I thought Council Combs was actually going to say that, but this is, I know school is just a little bit part of the very last bullet point, but really there's a lot of this, especially when it deals with education in regards to our drinking supply, and the Barnstable Youth Commission putting a presentation together that made the comprehensive wastewater management plan that much more consumable for young people, and putting together a presentation in regards to that and utilizing our youth, and that goes along with all these categories, but I just feel it's worth mentioning because the word school is in that and then as far as the substance abuse prevention, with our in plain sight trailer that our police department now has and our resource officers and our schools utilize, things of that nature that have happened since this. And I just think that's important to recognize that our police department and of course our town manager and his staff have worked to move towards these collaborations. And I know I saw Superintendent Sarah Hearn. I know she's out there with us tonight, and I just, I see this definitely as an opportunity to collaborate. So thank you.
Great. Another opportunity for collaboration. That seems to be a theme. Councillor Clark?
Thank you very much. And I echo Councillor Cullum's celebration of the state-of-the-art treatment we have for the town's water supply system. And I do think I see under strategies, it's the first bullet to support collaborative action to protect and expand our drinking water supply. When it comes to quality of life, we need to drink water. And as Manager L said, we live on top of our water supply. And if we don't make that a premium concern, strategy, goal, that we run out of water supplies in the next, beyond our time, 50, 100, 200 years, then what do? Desalinate the ocean? If we run out of quality sources. So I do applaud the town for being forward-looking, looking for new potential municipal water supplies and protecting the ones that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Schnepp?
Thank you. I'm struck in looking at this priority area that, again, it is dated by not viewing what we just went through with COVID and the incredible, again, collaborations that we had within our town and fire department, health department, and the county and the healthcare system in addressing COVID. And I think that it would be an area that we want to be definitely bringing out in our plan for future incidents where public health is going to have a major response.
Thank you, Councillor Schnepp. So hearing, again, a need to stay current and updated as throughout this. So once the strategic planning process happens, to be able to see the progress on that in the strategic plan as you move forward. And also I hear that the town has a lot to celebrate. So that's nice to hear as well. Any other questions or comments about the public health and safety section of the strategic plan?
If I might,
Of course.
just for your notes, I think along the lines of what Councilor Schnepp has shared, I think that that a workshop we've had a wonderful relationship with our fire and water district, but that is only going to continue to be critical, that collaboration. Chief Burke is a regular member of my senior, advising team, as I am for him more directly through Assistant Town Manager Clyburn, but and certainly Mike Wynn and all the other chiefs. We've developed an incredible relationship. It is needed, and it's only going to get more difficult going forward. So considering that in future strategies, as far as it's not really regional collaboration, but it certainly is collaboration with all those of authority in our community, so that we can best protect the public health and safety of our community. The other suggestion I would have for you to note, Sophie, is the world of policing has changed dramatically. We need our chief and his staff to share with our council for their consideration moving forward with our next strategic plan, what that means. And what sort of considerations and goals and strategies we might want to have so that they can best serve us in protecting public safety. So
Collaborative input specifically from the police department into the public health and safety section of the strategic plan.
Please.
Right. Councillor Neary.
Thank you, moderator Sophie and Dell. I'd just like to piggyback kind of on what Manager Ellis indicated and basically state some kudos to what's going on with the Hyannis water supply. I try to stay off this subject, but Hyannis water supply is an enterprise fund that we are actively involved with, but it only represents a small percentage of the total water in the town of Barnstable. So I know that the fire districts were mentioned prior. They're outside of our purview, but it should be something that is constantly kept on our field of vision on the horizon in terms of what we need to do for the total water quality in the town of Barnstable. I think that needs to be noted. And actually, in instances when we have conversation and control, and I know that the management of the town is following up on this, that it needs to be a topic of conversation in terms of the total view of the town's water supply, even in the areas that we are not actively in control of in regards to enterprise funds and those type of activities that we do. But Hans Kaiser and the carbon treatment that he does over there, that's state of the art. And as Councillor Cullen indicated, the hope would be that down the road we could expect those type of water treatment processes and the activities to extend throughout the entire town and frankly throughout all of Cape Cod. That would be my comment, and I think that should be noted as well in the overall plan.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Neary. Councillor Raptosetti?
Yes, before we leave that, the last bullet, there's a pretty important word that is wrong in that last sentence. And that after and joint programs, that should be changed to with police, school, youth, seniors. It's funny that the police, this is really the only time the police are mentioned, but I know we're going to be talking about infrastructure, but I think public health and safety with regards to our roads and our sidewalks and our bikeways have to be part of looking at the public health and safety of the community too.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Anything else on public health and safety? Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to housing.
All right, housing. Identify needs and develop, promote, and monitor townwide initiatives for income equitable, affordable, workforce, senior, and rental housing to meet the needs of the residents and increase the overall quality of housing in Barnstable. Strategies are to review zoning issues identified by council and the Zoning Board of Appeals to determine how best to achieve housing goals through zoning and regulatory changes. Proactively engage stakeholders with influence over this issue. Review the housing production plan to support this goal. Work in partnership with developers so they can take advantage of the available resources, funding, and assets to initiate housing projects. Explore housing solutions, including regional collaboration and creative financing to address homelessness, housing insecurity, and lack of available and affordable housing in Barnstable. Explore the possibility of using town assets to create affordable private housing opportunities. Pursue innovative structures and formats and use of town-owned land to expand quality workforce housing. There's a lot there. This is an enormous issue. The council also had guidance that they had provided with this, with the last strategic plan relevant to a representative zoning committee, looking at priority housing types, looking at creativity to navigate barriers relevant to housing. And they referenced, an example relative to, Seattle. And not quite sure where we went relevant to whatever that suggestion was at the time. Alternative wastewater solutions. So keeping all options open. And I think you're going to see that, to that last one, I think you'll see that in our 5-year updates as innovative alternatives become approved and available. They become a better option for consideration when we're trying to meet whatever the regulatory thresholds are that we're tasked with in a plan. Hard to do that when they're not an approved technology or they don't get you down to whatever that regulatory driver is. But absolutely. I'll stop there and certainly turn it back to you, Sophie.
Yeah, I know that this is a huge issue all across the country, as many of these are. And so again, just a reminder, we are taking comments, some comments, high-level comments about what you want to see in the next strategic plan, but also a reminder to focus on questions for Mr. Els about how his office is looking at these priority areas in the strategic plan. Councillor Cullum.
Yes, so I would like to comment on the LCPC, which is the Local Comprehensive Planning Committee. And when I look at this slide, I see initiatives for income, equitable, affordable, workforce, senior, and rental housing. And then if you go down to one of the bullet points below, it's affordable private housing opportunities, affordable, blah, 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 blah. So I would ask that, I know we're working toward a local comprehensive plan, and I'm appreciative and thankful that I was part of the process in choosing those candidates. But what I would like to say is that as we plan for the people that are identified in this slide from 2 years ago, we need those people on the committee. So as spaces become available, it would be fantastic, as attrition happens and people can't make meetings, it would be fantastic if we could source out some renters who have an idea of what Barnstable should look like in the future, as opposed to dealing with the voices that we always hear. Because I think that that's the big thing that we're missing. And I see it in the slide, but I don't see it in the committee. And I mean, I know it's really difficult. We just have to keep trying to get these people to speak and talk about what they want their Barnstable to look like. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions or comments on housing as a priority area in the strategic plan? Yes, Councillor Neary.
Thank you. Just one. We have regulatory agreements in place indicating that new construction, 10% should be either at market or affordable. And I don't want to be crass, but affordable really is not really in the nomenclature of reality these days. So I guess my hope would be that we have money set aside through CPC or various committees and commissions, and I would just hope that maybe we could, if we have developers come in, that a conversation ensues on whether the opportunity to increase those affordable units or market rate units, additional units. It would be nice to have that conversation in the, probably go through the building department saying, what is the dollar amount? I'd love to see, you can create affordable housing through philanthropy or through some set asides on monetary dollars. And it may already occur, and I apologize if that conversation doesn't take place, but I think on the development side of things, it would be great to have conversation had where, hey, you have to have 3, but maybe we could have 5, and what would that monetary dollar amount be to create an additional couple units? Again, I apologize if that conversation already occurs. I'm not aware of it if it does, but I know there's been some pushback on some recent projects that we've had where there are folks in town that are saying to the developer, well, you can afford it, so you should put X number of additional units, but there's a monetary dollar amount attached to that. And I think it would be a wonderful whether it's enacted upon or not, I think that should be part of the conversation on future development.
Thank you, Councilor Neary. Sounds like there's some energy behind this for a future agenda topic at a different meeting as well. President Levesque?
I mean, the fact this is a public meeting and that's, that is a great topic of discussion that, there is lots of conversation in regards to, we have a housing trust and there has been monies used from the housing trust for additional affordable housing. 850 Falmouth Road is a great example of that, that development that took place in the regulatory agreement. And then the inclusionary zoning ordinance that Councilor Neary is kind of alluding to, the fact that, right now we're at 10% at 65% AMI. There is discussion in regards to revisiting that at some point, and I would encourage, that I would love to, I'm going to be a continued part of that conversation with planning and development. I know Vice President Schnepp is interested in that, Town Manager Ells, and making that more relative to our conditions now, here and now. And if it's increasing the amount, the percentage, but yes, also increasing and working with the level of AMI, 65%, 80%, 100%, whatever it might be, 120%, because that is something that's needs to be addressed. And it's, we're learning more and more through COVID, since COVID happened, with so many sales of some rental properties, also more and more people grabbing up second homes, and the factors that go into that, and then looking at the situation we're in, and then again adjusting moving forward. So again, that will be something, I would promote having a continued discussion on and seeing that play out in our next strategic plan. And again, something that will dovetail and work alongside a local comprehensive plan with a local comprehensive plan committee. Thank you.
Thank you, President Levesque. If there are no other questions, let's move on to town infrastructure and assets. And Mark, you're muted.
I just want to point out that our planning and development department is actively working on a housing production plan, an update. And our assistant town manager is actively working on the use of town assets for these purposes. And we'll be bringing forward to town council, information relevant to both of those. I'm just pointing out 2 examples of how we use your guidance to continue our efforts moving forward. So, infrastructure and assets.
I think President Levesque has a comment before we move on.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Just in getting ahead of that as well, November 5th, we'll actually be getting a report from, on that agenda, we'll be getting a report from our Director of Asset Management, David Anthony, in regards to a number of properties. So thank you, Town Manager Ells, for reminding me of that.
Okay. Infrastructure and assets. Maintain and improve existing infrastructure, capital assets, aquatic resources, making improvements when necessary, and ensuring town assets are managed, maintained, disposed of to serve the highest and best use moving forward. Facilitate comprehensive infrastructure improvement planning for municipal roads, buildings, facilities, transportation systems, communication systems, information infrastructure, water, wastewater system, historical properties, and other capital assets with an eye toward permit-ready and shovel-ready projects. Support the exploration of traditional and non-traditional methods for comprehensive water management and monitoring of implementation efforts. Continue to inventory and evaluate the status of town assets and dispose of or acquire assets as appropriate. Evaluate options for effective and economical development of renewable energy resources, energy conservation programs, and solid waste and recycling. And the council did have guidance relevant to the town infrastructure with a pretty significant focus on renewables, We're also looking at resiliency. We're bringing on, and I think we're down to a recommended candidate for an environmental sustainability coordinator. Bringing them on under the town manager's office, Dave Anthony, to assist in that area. So, again, a direct result of the council prioritizing this and us putting resources to where those priorities exist. Certainly, we have extensive, comprehensive infrastructure planning, whether it be earlier we talked about a comprehensive dredge. Yes, we have a comprehensive dredge program, and we are implementing that incrementally as we move forward with our capital improvements. We have water, wastewater, roadways, marine and other environments. Sandy Neck, we've asked President Levesque to consider a workshop at some point in the future that will have a discussion about the result of looking at how to manage Sandy Neck over the coming decade. So all of this is active at this point. I would just point out, Sophie, that, and this is a tough one, I believe, and it comes back to the earlier question about weighting these priority areas. When we start to talk about open space versus disposition of assets, and because they can fall into multiple categories, and because there isn't a weighting of any of these priorities, we try to accomplish them all kind of in context to how we're being tasked with them. And that tasking can come from multiple places, our community, regulator, etc. We should have more discussions about this. I think it's going to be really important moving forward that we talk about our assets, both those that we currently own or those that we may want to own, and make sure we're clear on it, because we want to use logic here. We want to use intellect when we're proceeding with which assets do we retain, which assets do we dispose, which assets do we acquire. So I'll just ask for that to be considered moving forward for future strategic planning discussion.
Consideration of assets. Great, thank you. Questions, comments about how the town manager looks at priority areas, infrastructure and assets? Yes, Councillor Colum.
I feel like Ann Kennedy, is she watching? Just kidding. So I just providing a little humor maybe. So I just wanted to say that I am always incredibly proud of the capital improvement plan and the thought that goes into it, and the deliberate decision making that's made. I never worry when I go have a meeting with, whether it's the folks over on Ocean Street or the Yachtsman folks or the Hyannis Civic Association. I never worry about the quality of our staff or the planning or any of the procedural stuff at all, and it's incredibly appreciated. It sets our town above and beyond other towns. When you go to the Mass Municipal Association, we're way ahead of the conferences that are being held there. We're scratching our heads like, well, that's new. That's not new. We do that all the time in Barnstable. But it makes you really appreciate the vision that our leadership has for, and leadership, I mean all of us, and Mark and his entire team, Dan Santos, Mark Milne, to make all these things possible. And I was thinking today about how many projects there are that have happened in my tenure on C Street and in my precinct. And it's amazing the amount of stuff that's been pulled off, from sewers to redoing the roads to the whole Ocean Street project that's out to bid now and being designed. I think it's just being designed actually now. It's just amazing the breadth of knowledge that we have and experience. So I'm very, very appreciative of that and very proud of it. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions about infrastructure and asset?
Sophie, can I comment?
Of course.
So another area for our upcoming 25-26 discussion. So we have contracts for, Mark Mill, correct me if I'm wrong, but for electricity and natural gas. So we're in a pretty good position, even though we're looking around us and we're seeing these costs escalate. But by 25, I think those contracts are up. So we're going to see a major adjustment here. We need to start talking about that because it has a dramatic budget impact and it's not discretionary. And we really need to look at every opportunity, and it's timely to have Dave Anthony and his supporting staff there to help us look at whether it's renewable or energy conservation that makes sense for Barnstable. But I think by 25, we're going to be having a real serious conversation about the financial impact of what the next energy contracts might bring us. So that's just something to put on everybody's radar.
Great, thank you. Counselor Schnapp. You're muted.
Thank you. I look at this area and I'm just overwhelmed at how dense it is in terms of how much it covers when you look at that very first bullet of facilities and sewer. I mean, there's so much that is going on in this town related to infrastructure. And I agree with Councilor Cullum. We do a tremendous job to keep all of these things going. I know we have in the last bullet the solid waste and recycling programs, but I know that there are going to be some very interesting conversations we need to have about our transfer station, you know, how we pick up and deal with our waste, both that which we can't recycle and that which we can. So nothing to note other than just how much is included in this particular priority.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, I feel like infrastructure has come up a number of times already. President Levesque.
Thank you, Sophie. Just wanted to also just to share information in regards to upcoming scheduled events. We are going to facilitate discussion with Cape Light Compact coming up in their Mass Save programs. Also on November 5th, it will actually dovetail to David Anthony, Director David Anthony also handles our communications with them and with the fact that with rates going up and costs, you know, obviously continually increasing, that it'll give our residents and our counselors some information in regards to, you know, savings and ways to conserve resources. So I just wanted to share that moving forward, and good to have that type of discussion, and again, ways we can improve and again conserve energy. So thank you, and save money hopefully along the way.
Great, thank you so much. Let's move on to education. And this is our final topic area.
All right, education. Support the provision of a safe, high-quality public education for all students in an increased diverse student body in partnerships with local, state, and federal entities. Work cooperatively with the school department to approve a budget that adheres to standard municipal accounting practices, is clear and understandable for all residents, and meets the short-term and long-term operating and capital needs of our school system and the municipality. Work in conjunction with the school department to deliver a substance use prevention model for our, you know, K through 12. Strive to reduce the impacts of unfunded state and federal mandates in addition to the revised Chapter 70 and make public aware of the impact of the same. Support efforts to amend Chapter 70 funding formulas in order to provide more resources to the town. I think you all know that's happened. Work cooperatively with school administration to develop plans for administrative and infrastructure consolidation, conduct periodic assessments of consolidation, and support initiatives to create a culturally diverse educational environment for all public school students. Now, I know our superintendent has joined us both in rolling up her sleeves and participating with me and my staff, but also taking over Barnstable Public Schools. So, she and I talked about the goal and the strategies in general. They're in line with what our school committee and she are looking at. But again, I think I said this earlier, the school committee's tasked with doing this on our behalf. They're elected, and it's one of the things that they do for our community. I think it's critical that our liaisons participate to the degree that they can as they develop that, and that we understand it, and that whatever we put into our strategic plan is reflective and supportive of what they're establishing for our community. It's really important. In general, after looking at this, I think the superintendent said to me, yeah, Mark, these are generally the direction. I think it's going to probably get a lot more specific as we develop them over on the school committee and the superintendent side. But we talked a little bit about the second to the last bullet, which had to do with looking at consolidation opportunities. She and I are in discussion about grounds and grounds maintenance, but that isn't a quick and easy change. I think that there are significant cost increases because the schools aren't adequately funded to maintain their grounds. And so there's an urgency because of that, but there's also a practicality that we have limited resources. Therefore, we need to make sure that however we do this, best serves the community, protects the asset, both in maintaining its useful life and functionality. So she and I are in those discussions actively, and and I expect that those will continue until we bring forward a plan to town council. You've seen capital improvements. You'll see more, but it's really the operations side of this and how to best do it so it's cost effective and gets us to that desired outcome that she and I will continue to work on. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Questions or comments on how the town manager's office uses the education strategic priority area?
May need to be updated. I think some of the middle ones are at least the chapter 70. I don't know how active that effort is because of the recent changes, but you should at least look at that and see how we want to stay. Certainly support of our schools to obtain funding, always critical. Us to obtain funding, because they are critical. So.
Thank you. Councillor Cullum.
Just briefly, I'd like to say that I consider the all the ball fields, all of that are town assets and should be treated as such and shared. And if they're underfunded now, then they should be funded even if there's a switch in maintenance and it ends up being the town. It costs a lot to redo a field. I learned that in my first 5 years on this council. So, any sort of field maintenance that we could take over would benefit us in the long run. I really believe the future of our town, and I know you do too, Mark, is with our children. And we owe it to them to make sure that we are involved in providing them the best possible place to learn. And I'm really looking forward to a new chapter in schools and a new dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments and questions on the education priority area? Great, thank you. Well, I would just like to give an opportunity to open up to any questions or comments about any of the priority areas that we've talked about, especially for folks that haven't asked a question or provided a comment yet who are on the council. We talked about finance, communications, economic development, environment and natural resources, regulatory process and performance, public health and safety, housing, town infrastructure and assets, and education. So just giving one more opportunity for comments on this, and then we're going to go on to another topic in just a moment. Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much. I just want to put it out there as we are doing this strategic plan. and that we have, as was mentioned, an update with the local comprehensive planning committee to develop an update on the LCP, but there's also the hazard mitigation plan, open space and recreation plan, housing production plan, and I believe there's a historic preservation plan. So we have plans, and I guess we ought to integrate them and make sure that we're aware that as we make more plans, that we're not contradicting ourselves or underutilizing the plans that have already been done. Just putting that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Clark.
Hmm.
I was going to say some of the themes that I heard while you all were talking about was the importance of collaboration with different entities within your town and outside of your town. Coordination with other plans I heard over and over again. So thank you again, Councillor Clark. Providing some kind of update so that you can keep track of your progress, and related to that, celebrating your progress. It sounded like there's been a lot of good things done in the last 2 years since this plan was first developed. Making sure that there's a clear understanding of the roles of staff and counselors of the council, so that it's clear where the visioning part and the strategy part of the strategic plan that is the council's role ends, and where the specific details that the staff take over begin. Yeah, and then also there were a lot of areas that you all mentioned about adaptation, you know, how to adapt after COVID, how to adapt with increasing costs, how to adapt given climate change, how to adapt given, you know, new concerns like PFAS in the water. So again, CBI is, which is me, is going to come up with high-level notes for you all and send those out so that you'll be able to review that, and then that can inform some of your strategic planning in the future. Again, we tried not to get too in the weeds in this conversation because you guys are going to have an opportunity to get your fingers all up in those weeds, you know, coming up next year. So before we wrap up, we did want to talk a little bit about more high-level topics that still need to be addressed in the next stage of strategic planning. And I know there was one in specific that the council has that you are aware of. And President Levesque, if you'd like to introduce that.
Sure. Thank you, Sophie. A number of councilors have brought up to me and in talking with town manager Els as well. And again, this is something that, you know, and the last point was education is something that, again, this topic should include all departments, including our school department. And that is the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the idea that, you know, this is something that covers all the topics of our strategic plan, and approaching it, you know, in a thoughtful but aggressive way. And the fact that, you know, I think, and again, I've said this, and I know I never want it to sound cliche, but I think what's come out of COVID, and again, from what I've seen as not only a town council, but the president of the council, is that there is an uninvolved, underrepresented group of people in our community, no matter what race, color, creed that they come from. And I do mean everybody. You know, it could be poor people, it could be homeless, it could be people of color, it could be, you know, a Hispanic population, whatever it might be, that the people who don't, you know, English is not a first language. Those numbers are rising in our school system. You know, how ways that we can better serve, better address those types of things, and again, get them involved, you know. And you know, it's brought up in a couple of meetings where some things that we have shortcomings in. And again, it's not intentional necessarily, but what we need to do is be more intentional in regards to reaching these people groups, and going what we've talked about, going where they are, and getting, again, I'm not going to map this out. This is something where this is a concept, this is an idea. This is, as Councilor Cullum had mentioned prior, this is something that will continue. It's fluid. It's constantly evolving. It's not something where we necessarily arrive. Not that we do a bad job necessarily, but it's something where we always look to improve. Town Manager Els mentioned, you know, communication as far as leadership goes, and that needs to constantly be able to be improved, find new ways. It's again, it's, you know, who knew that, you know, 3 years ago that we would be allowing people to chime in into a town council meeting via remotely, and be heard. When they might have 15 minutes where they can speak and they don't have to stand in town council meeting for 4 hours. Again, something I've reiterated, something I've said, but I think it's worth repeating. Because somebody else new might be hearing that, or a new counselor might be hearing it for the second time, maybe not quite understanding it the first time I mentioned it. So diversity, equity, inclusion, how that will look. Again, there have already been conversations in regards to town manager Ellis. I'm not going to sit here and map that out for him because that's not what we're doing here. This is the idea. This is the vision for our town. Again, involving, I think it is important to involve and have one vision for the entire town. That means involving our school system, where our children are, and also be able to reach those people groups through the school system. Town Councilor Cullen has mentioned that a number of times. I would support that idea as well. So just to introduce this idea, and I think that it should be implemented moving forward in our strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Bye-bye. So diversity, equity, inclusion is one high-level area that is not addressed in the current strategic plan, at least not at any level of detail. And are there other areas the strategic plan is missing that you feel like should be incorporated? That's the question right now. Yes, Councillor Cullum.
I just think it's worth saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion can put in a lot of other things on the map, i.e. tighter collaboration, envisioning with the schools, i.e. public engagement with a totally new group. If we can get in front of parents, if we can get in those school folders that everyone reads when their kid brings them home, if we can get in 3 languages, then what does that mean later? 10 years down the road, what does Barnstable look like? What does the town council look like? What do our boards and committees look like? Does it move us in a way where we have a more representative democracy with our meeting? Because now we have Zoom, so we can meet like this. And I think it's going to really change everything in such a positive way. And yes, it'll be very challenging, but I think it will change things in such a positive way. And I really look forward to capturing that voice. It's so missing and so important. So I just think it's going to make us look at everything different. It's going to make us look at asset management different. It's going to maybe make us look at the regulatory agreements that we agree to. Maybe it will make us look at regulatory agreements we already granted to see if they're actually being lived up to before we grant another one. I just think it's a new way of looking at the world we create, a more inclusive way. And I'm thankful that President Levesque and for all the support that I've had on the idea. And obviously, Mark, you've been great about it. And just trying to build a better Barnstable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments, other additions, questions? Councillor Leck.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on that as a brand new counselor here. Communication seems to be very lacking, and I know that's been brought up, as well as the representation of everyone in the community. I agree with both of those things. But it seems like as we reviewed this strategic plan, we provide the guidance, the vision, if you will, and then the execution aspect of it falls on the staff under Mr. L, the various department. I feel like as a town councilor being elected by voters, the onus is on me to communicate with my constituents. And I don't sense that is something that is shared with the others. And maybe that could be explored as we move forward, maybe in the communication aspect, there's a shared responsibility for execution. It doesn't all fall on the staff and Mr. Rouse. I'd just be curious on that, because that's something I really want to try to work in with my constituents.
Councillor, that's shared responsibility of execution or shared responsibility to communicate out about execution?
Well, particularly in the area of communication, is getting to people. These people that we think we're missing, well, they all are here somewhere. They're all within our precincts. They exist. Why aren't we communicating with them? And I don't know. As I say, I walked around a lot when I was from my office, talked to a lot of folks of all different walks of life. I, I took Portuguese speakers with me to talk to those folks who did not speak English. I mean, I'm just wondering in terms of the execution of communication, that it's a shared responsibility. If that could be explored, that we are not just the high level and then we just sit back and it's up to Mr. Ells and the folks. I just would be curious what the folks thought of that, and if that could be explored as we work forward in the strategy.
Great, thank you, Councillor. President Levesque?
Just to respond to that, Councilor Lutke, I would say, and I know you're new to as a councilor, but there are many ways actually that I know for a fact that many councilors communicate with their constituents either through newsletters, websites, through just town communications. We have town meetings, councilor communications, civic associations, visiting actually certain areas. I am at the personally, I'm at the Brazilian Health Ministry every Wednesday, meeting with Mike Macinas, Carlos Barboza. I consider to be a colleague and a friend, and he's gotten involved in a number of committees, and actually the committee that you've been assigned to, Human Services rather. He's on that committee there that you're the liaison to. So there's lots of ways to communicate through the town. Again, there's always ways to improve, but and you've had that opportunity. You've had that great opportunity to be able to go knock on people's doors and really see and come in face-to-face contact. I don't know if that's possible for every counselor to be able to do that on a daily basis. Obviously, when it comes time for election time, it would probably benefit if you want to be reelected, but at the same time, it's not necessarily required to necessarily. I think it's unreasonable to ask people to do that type of outreach, but just being able to go where you normally would go. You go to church, you let people know you're constantly talking, you're constantly an ambassador for the town, not only in the village and precinct that you live in, but every precinct. Maybe go to another civic association meeting, maybe find out, because we don't just represent the precincts that we live in, we represent the entire town of Barnstable. When we take an oath, it's the town of Barnstable. Mission statement in the strategic plan is the town of Barnstable. So I think that it's, again, many ways to communicate, always good to have that. And I would recommend that you reach out to different councils and find ways that they have been successful. And I think that'll help you and your predecessor. He was a great communicator, Paul Hebert, and the things that he did to reach his community and make himself available. So, and of course, we all have our passions as well, right? So different, in committees and things of that nature that, and superpowers, quite honestly, that we all bring to the table. So, and utilize those types of things to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you, President Levesque. So this isn't your last bite at the apple. Strategic planning is forthcoming, and Councillor Schnapp, if you'd like to speak a little bit to the next steps.
Sure. Thank you, Sophie. So as I spoke earlier in our meeting, we hope that this process will continue in early 2023 so that it will coincide more closely with our budgeting process. So we will be taking the feedback that Sophie has gathered through this process to sort of map out a strategic planning process for early 2023. So I would say stay tuned. Please share any comments. This is an iterative process. The notes will be shared with everybody, and any additional comments about what you think is a good way forward would be welcome.
Yes, Mr. Ells.
Thank you, Mark Ells. So just so I'm clear moving forward, Mark Milne has issued budget instructions. We are proceeding with capital. Typically that's done by December, or at least 80% plus. We really ramp up off by November, which is what, 15 days away at this point. We're going to use the existing strategic plan. Now, if there's anything in there that's outdated, obviously we don't have to focus on that. The general, your mission, your goals, your strategies are all broad enough and I believe well aligned with the programs and services and projects that we are undertaking. In addition to that, in a few areas like lakes and ponds, like the issue of diversity and equity and inclusion, we're moving forward in 24 on those fronts. Those are, in a sense, Lake and a Pond is a program area. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a community commitment to something, in my opinion, much greater than the town of Barnstable, that we all in Barnstable need to embrace and then move forward with, and we're going to play our role. We're in Bill Cole's in the development of the types of human resources we need, both staff and consultant, to help us successfully organize this and then to move it forward. We're actively working on that. And if there's budget impacts, which I'm sure there will be, you'll see them in the 24 budget. I'm also coordinating directly with Superintendent Ahern on this. We've had meetings and discussions, and we will continue to do so. I know that she sees diversity as a strength, the same as I do, and that we need to put in place the resources necessary so that our community is represented, our community is engaged, our community is a part of what we're all doing. So that's where I'm going. If you don't want me to go there, I really need to know in like the next 45 days because we're going to be well down that path. And then certainly 25, 26, you'll be a wonderful opportunity to say, okay, that was fine, Mark, but you got to keep going in this area. That's what I expect. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Any final comments? And then I'll turn it over to President Levesque to close the meeting. Great. Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me. I did want to give one word of thanks to Sarah Beal Fletcher, who's been running our Zoom meeting. I've spent a lot of time running Zoom meetings and really appreciate all the work you're doing behind the scenes. President Levesque.
I just want to say thank you, Sophie, for being with us, for facilitating. Really appreciate you, coming to our aid and really helping us through this process and really giving me an opportunity to participate in a way that I normally don't get to participate. So I do appreciate that, and Town Manager Els as well. And in some ways, this was an academic exercise in some ways, especially for the newer counselors, and sometimes for other counselors. Look, there's no surprise here that a lot of input was given by Councilor Rep Grissetti and Councilor Cullum. There are counselors that have been here the longest amount of time. They've been through the most strategic plans. They know how to map it out. So I appreciate your input. Councilor Schnepp really took a leadership role in helping me organize this and be able to delegate that. And that was very, very helpful. And I thank Vice President Schnepp for taking on that role, and everybody being here, the directors. Your camera's not necessarily on, but I know you're there and I know you're listening, and I know you will react appropriately as far as this discussion goes. And again, everybody that in our community that's tuning in, you can see that we're doing the very best we can to try to put forward the best possible plan to address this quality of life that we want our residents to have. And we don't necessarily agree on every aspect of it, but we really try to work together to kind of come to the best solution that's the best for everybody, right? There's no perfect plan per se, but we'll really try to implement something that will benefit the entire town. So again, with that, I just say thank you again, Town Manager Els, your staff, and I would, I guess, take a motion to adjourn if there's no other comment.
So moved. Second.
First and a second. And just for, if we could do a roll call vote, please, Cynthia.
Councilors Starr,
Yes.
Lutke,
Yes.
Atzelis,
Yes.
Cusick,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Rep Grissetti,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Knapp,
Yes.
Cullum,
Yes.
you are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody. And I look forward to our meeting next Thursday, a joint meeting with our school committee. Looking forward to that as well. Take care, everyone.